The first time I understood the depth of her was the night she shattered our shared teapot. The sound was a sharp, painful crack in the comfortable silence of our dorm room, a silence usually filled only with the hum of my desk lamp and the rustle of her turning philosophy pages. I turned from the dizzying spiral of a biology textbook's diagram to find her frozen in the kitchenette's weak light, a statue of grief outlined against the refrigerator door. Her hand remained outstretched over the devastation of blue and white porcelain scattered across the linoleum floor. Then the statue crumbled. She folded onto her knees, her shoulders, usually held with such easy, athletic grace, collapsing into a silent, violent tremor. For 3 months, Alara had been simply my roommate. A whirlwind of messy blonde buns and dense texts, a creature of loud, sudden laughter and the constant, clean scent of lemongrass soap. We were a study in peaceful contrasts, her beautiful chaos a gentle counterpoint to my meticulous order. We shared milk and class notes, complained about the dining hall's mysterious meatloaf, and coexisted in a bubble of easy, superficial friendship. But this raw, soundless unraveling over a broken teapot was a fault line cracking open the bedrock of our simple coexistence. My body moved before my mind could process a thought. I found myself on the floor beside her, the rough industrial carpet pressing into my knees. I did not speak, possessed no words that could bridge the chasm of her sorrow. My hands, acting on their own volition, began to gather the sharp, glittering shards. When my fingers brushed against hers, she flinched but did not pull away. Her head was bowed, a golden curtain hiding her face. I picked up the largest piece, the one with the painted stem of a forget-me-not, and pressed it into her open palm. Her fingers closed around it, a white-knuckled fist around a forgotten flower. Then she looked at me. Her eyes, the color of a storm-tossed sea, were swimming, and in their gray depths, I saw a universe of pain I had never guessed she carried. This was not just my college roommate anymore. This was a girl with a history, a heartache, a secret self she kept hidden behind easy smiles. In that moment, she became a mystery I felt an urgent, desperate need to solve. The broken teapot became a silent covenant between us. We never spoke of that night directly, but the air in our room changed, growing thicker, charged with a new and delicate awareness. I began to collect the details of her like precious artifacts. The way she hummed a tuneless, off-key melody when lost in thought, the specific way she would curl her feet beneath her on the couch, making herself small, the faint dusting of freckles across the bridge of her nose that only appeared after she'd spent a Saturday in the botany gardens. I learned the teapot had been her grandmother's, the last tangible piece of a woman she had adored, a loss from the previous spring that was still a fresh, open wound. She offered this information not as a confession, but as a quiet aside during a late-night study session, her voice carefully neutral, but I heard the fracture beneath the surface. It was the first key she gave me, and I held it with the utmost care, a sacred truth. Our friendship deepened, transforming from a convenience of proximity into a conscious, daily choice. Late nights became our sacred space, our desks pushed close together, the glow of our laptops an intimate campfire in the dark of the room. The silence between us was no longer empty but comfortable, a shared language of companionship and understanding. One night, drowning in the complexities of cellular respiration, I fell asleep on my textbook, my cheek pressed against the glossy page. I woke to a warm, firm pressure on my shoulder. Her hand was there, a steadying anchor. She didn't shake me, just squeezed gently, guiding my sleepy form from the chair toward my waiting bed. As I drifted back into dreams, I felt the whisper-soft brush of her fingers across my forehead, moving a stray piece of hair. That touch, so simple and so profound, lingered on my skin for hours, a brand of a tenderness I had never known, a silent promise of something more. The first kiss happened without a single word spoken. It was a rain-soaked Thursday, the world outside our window a blur of gray water and streaked light. We were crammed on our small, worn couch, a shared blanket a puddle of wool over our legs. My knee was pressed against the solid warmth of her thigh, a point of contact that sent a constant, low current humming through my body. I looked away from the flickering screen of her laptop to find her gaze already on me, intense and unreadable in the erratic blue light. Her eyes dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes, a silent, terrifying, exhilarating question. My heart hammered a frantic, wild rhythm against my ribs. I didn't move, couldn't breathe. She leaned in slowly, giving me every possible chance to retreat, her eyes fluttering shut. Then her lips were on mine. It was soft. An exploration. A confirmation. It tasted of the cheap peppermint tea we'd been drinking and something else, something uniquely, essentially Alara, like sunlight on old books and wild, open fields. Her hand rose to cradle my jaw, her thumb stroking my cheekbone with a reverence that made my breath catch, and the world dissolved. There was only the soft, persistent pressure of her mouth, the warmth of her hand, the drumming of the rain against the glass, and the seismic, internal shift of something slotting into place deep inside me, a missing piece I had never known I lacked. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead against mine, our breath mingling in the small, warm space between us. She didn't smile or look away. She just looked at me, her stormy eyes clear and sure, and in that look, my entire universe reoriented itself, its new center of gravity located squarely in her. The turning point arrived with the spring, a cruel and beautiful irony dressed in sunshine and budding trees. It was a letter, thick and officious, lying on her desk like a sleeping serpent. The return address was a stark, embossed logo from a university in Switzerland. A prestigious, competitive semester abroad program for philosophy students. Her dream. She had never told me she applied. When she returned from her morning run, her skin glowing with a fine sheen of sweat and her breath coming in happy, visible puffs, she saw me looking at it. Her brilliant, post-run smile faded into a grimace of guilt and apprehension. The unspoken words hung between us, heavy and suffocating. She had applied on a whim, months ago, before us, before the kisses in the rain, before the shared silence had become our most intimate language. She never thought, in a million years, she would actually get in. The acceptance was a stone dropped into the still, deep pond of our new happiness, the ripples threatening to capsize our fragile little boat. The joy I should have felt for her, the pride, was instantly devoured by a cold, sharp fear that coiled in my stomach. This beautiful, fragile thing we had built, this connection that had only just begun to unfurl its tender leaves, was now living on a strict and swiftly expiring clock. Switzerland was not a weekend trip. It was 4 months, an ocean, a different language, a different life. We didn't fight. There was nothing to fight. This was her future, brilliant and deserved, and I was just a girl in a dorm room, my love too new to be a chain, only a quiet, aching weight in my chest. That night, we lay in my narrow bed, her back pressed tightly to my front, my arm a possessive, terrified band around her waist. I breathed her in, trying to memorize the specific scent of her shampoo, the feel of each individual rib expanding and contracting under my splayed hand. I felt the terrifying fragility of it all. We were a delicate glass sculpture, finally assembled, in a world that had just decided to start an earthquake. Just a quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and stay with us here on Sapphic Tales. The following weeks were a masterclass in bittersweet tension. Every moment we shared was now painted with the unmistakable hue of impending loss. Our touches became more desperate, more memorizing. I would trace the elegant, delicate line of her spine as she slept, my fingertips learning the landscape of her, trying to brand it into my memory forever. Our kisses, once soft and questioning, now held a frantic, hungry edge, as if we could somehow seal our souls together through the desperate pressure of our lips alone, fusing into a single entity that could not be torn apart by geography. We began to steal time like thieves, feeling both guilty and exhilarated. Skipping a dull lecture to walk through the arboretum as the cherry blossoms fell around us in a silent, pink storm, catching in her hair like natural crowns. Spending entire Sundays tangled together on the couch, not speaking, not watching movies, just existing in the same air, our limbs a deliberate knot. The world outside our door became a looming threat. Every conversation with friends about summer plans, every posted flyer for graduation events, was a tiny, sharp reminder of the clock ticking down, each tick a hammer blow against my heart. The fear was a living, breathing creature inside me, whispering insidious truths in the dark. It told me that what we had was a situational miracle, a beautiful, intense product of shared space and emotional proximity that could not, survive the test of real distance. I was terrified that I was just a chapter in her college story, one she would remember with fondness, but ultimately leave behind as she moved on to bigger, brighter things. My own insecurities, usually kept locked in a deep, dark vault, began to leak out, poisoning my thoughts. Was I enough? Was this all-consuming love I felt, which seemed to define my every waking moment, just a pleasant diversion for her, a college experiment? The second kiss that truly mattered happened during a thunderstorm. The sky had turned a deep, bruised purple, and the rain assaulted our window with a violent, relentless fury. We were having a silent argument, a terrible, wordless battle built entirely from fear and unspoken goodbyes. It was about something trivial, laughably so. Who would be responsible for watering her stubborn, spiky succulent while she was gone? But it was about everything. It was about abandonment, about responsibility, about the ghost of her presence she would leave behind. I turned away from her, hot tears of frustration and fear stinging my eyes, staring out at the chaotic, flashing weather, feeling just as turbulent inside. She came up behind me, her body a warm, solid presence not quite touching mine. Her hands settled on my hips, their weight familiar and calming, and she pressed her forehead between my shoulder blades, a point of intense heat. I felt the angry, defensive energy drain from me, replaced by a profound, hollow sadness that seemed to fill my very bones. I turned within the circle of her arms. Her face was also wet with tears, her eyes red-rimmed and hopeless. And then she was kissing me, a kiss of apology and fear and a desperate, clinging love. It was salty with our shared sorrow, and it felt like both a promise and a goodbye, a confusing, painful contradiction. We made love for the first time that night, with the storm raging as our witness, our bodies moving together in a rhythm that felt both ancient and desperately, heartbreakingly new. It was not just a physical act, it was a conversation, a plea, a sealing of a vow in skin and breath and trembling hands. When I cried out her name, it was a sob ripped from the deepest part of me, and when she whispered mine against the damp skin of my neck, her voice breaking, it was a prayer for a salvation we both knew was impossible. Don't forget, every week we share new tales. Subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you're always the first to hear them. The week of her departure was a slow-motion funeral, each day a somber procession towards an inevitable end. The room was half empty, her suitcases yawning open on the floor like graves, slowly consuming her presence, her clothes, her books, from our shared space. The air was thick and heavy with everything we were desperately trying not to say, the unspoken words lying between us like a heavy fog. We moved around each other with a painful, exaggerated carefulness, as if a sudden noise or a misplaced glance could shatter the fragile performance of normalcy we were struggling and failing to maintain. The night before her flight, we lay in her bed, our limbs entwined so tightly it was impossible to discern where I ended and she began, a single creature of shared dread. Our whispered talks, those precious bedside conversations that had built the very foundation of us, now felt like final rites, last confessions before a long journey from which one may not return. We spoke of our deepest, most secret fear, not of the distance itself, but of the slow, insidious erosion of memory. The terror that the specific sound of a laugh, the exact feel of a hand, the particular way she said my name, could fade over time into a pleasant, fuzzy impression, a story told rather than a life lived. I confessed my secret dread that I was not memorable enough, that my love was too quiet, my presence too gentle, and that I would become a footnote in the epic, brilliant story of her life. She held my face in her hands, her touch firm and sure, her eyes blazing with a fierce, undeniable intensity in the dark. She saw the raw, frightened core of me, the insecure child hiding behind a facade of confidence, and she did not flinch. She looked at all of me and did not find me wanting. Our final kisses were slow, deep, and imprinted with a heartbreaking finality. They were a map of every touch, every sigh, every moment of shared sunlight we had ever cherished. We moved together toward a shared, quiet peak, not of passion, but of pure, undiluted connection, a last, desperate attempt to brand ourselves onto each other's very souls, to become a permanent part of each other's cellular makeup. I felt her heartbeat against mine, a frantic, syncopated rhythm that gradually slowed and calmed into one steady, unified drumbeat, two bodies becoming one quiet, grieving organism. She whispered into the skin of my shoulder that I felt like home, that this, right here in my arms, was the only place she had ever felt truly, completely safe. The storm of our beginning had found its quiet eye, a moment of perfect, terrible peace in the looming chaos of our separation. If it kept you hooked, subscribe now to Sapphic Tales so you never miss the next. Don't forget more stories like this are waiting. Subscribe now to Sapphic Tales before we continue. The airport was a sterile, fluorescent purgatory, a place of in-between where hellos and goodbyes collided in a cacophony of rolling suitcases and tearful reunions. I stood with her at the edge of the security line, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my jeans to keep from clutching her and never, ever letting go. She looked small, diminished by the bulk of her backpack and the immense, invisible weight of her journey. A river of strangers flowed around us, their lives moving forward with purpose, utterly oblivious to the personal cataclysm happening in their midst. She turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed but dry now, filled with a determined, ferocious love that was almost too painful to witness. She didn't speak. She simply reached out and, with a tenderness that shattered me, tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering on my cheek in a caress that felt like both a blessing and a curse. Then her hand slid down my arm, her fingers lacing with mine for one last, electric, soul-wrenching moment. It was a silent language, a touch that said everything words could never hope to capture. I love you. I will miss you every second. Wait for me. Remember me. And then she let go. The loss of contact was a physical shock. She hefted her bag onto her shoulder, flashed me one last, wobbly, heartbreaking smile that shattered my heart into a million irreparable pieces, and walked through the archway without a single backward glance. I stood there, rooted to the spot, long after she had vanished from sight, the ghost of her hand still burning in mine, the taste of her permanent, aching imprint on my lips. I returned to our room. It was just a room now. An empty, silent box. A shell. Her side was bare, the bed stripped of its sheets, a naked mattress staring back at me. The only thing left was her succulent, sitting resolutely on the windowsill, a small, green monument to her absence. My charge. My promise. I picked it up, the terracotta pot cool and rough against my skin. And then I saw it. On my desk, where my biology textbook usually lived, was a single piece of blue and white porcelain. It was the shard with the painted forget-me-not, the one I had placed in her palm the night her grief overflowed. She had carefully glued it to a small, smooth piece of sanded wood, transforming it into a pendant on a simple leather cord. Next to it was a note, in her looping, messy, beautiful handwriting. It didn't speak of eternal love or promises to write every day. It simply said, "A piece of my heart to keep yours company." I clutched the pendant in my hand, the sharp, unyielding edges a comforting, grounding pain against my palm. The silence in the room was no longer empty. It was filled with her absence, a physical, aching void that I knew would take a long, long time to learn to carry. But it was also filled with the echo of her laughter, the memory of her touch, the faint, fading scent of lemongrass that still clung to her pillowcase if I pressed my face deep into it. She was gone, but she was everywhere. Our friendship had become something more, something that would now have to learn to span an ocean, something that had already fundamentally, irrevocably altered the very architecture of my heart. The story was not over. It was simply an intermission, the main character waiting in the wings for her cue to return. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe to Sapphic Tales so you don't miss the next one. I closed my fingers around the forgotten flower, the ceramic biting into my skin, a small, steady pain to anchor me to the world. And I began the long, slow, patient work of waiting.